Okay, so for those of you who are joining us on recording, once again, I'm a little bit into class, forgot to press record at the start of class. We're going over a summary, and then you're going to start a Unit 1B checkpoint kind of quiz activity. So it's going to be a pretty short video for today. We've already talked about in this section, we identified factors and multiples of numbers between 1 and 100. So we're going to discuss what it means to be a factor and multiple today. We learned that numbers can share factors and multiples. For example, both 6 and 8 have 2 as a factor, and both have multiples of 24. Okay, so I'm going to sit on this point for a second. How do we know that 6 and 8 both have 2 as a factor? So how do I know that 6 has 2 as a factor, and then how do I know that 8 has 2 as a factor? Let's do those two separately. What math problem can we show to prove that 2 is a factor of 6? Camila.
6 times 2 and 8 times 2.
So we're close. We're thinking of 2 as the factor, right? Remember in our factor, if we had like, oops, I'm still with the highlighter. Let me go back to this. Like 5 times 6 equals 30. These are the factors. This is the multiple of each of those factors, right? So if I'm thinking of 2 as the factor, how can I prove that 2 is a factor of 6?
Three times 2.
Right. 3 times 2 equals 6, because there's the 2 there. That's a factor. And then we have 6 here. Oops. That's the multiple of 2 and a multiple of 3. Okay. And then Camila, do you want to show how 2 is a factor of 8 as well?
2 times 4 equals 8.
Nice work. So 2 and 8. So 2 is once again the factor, and there's the multiple there. All right, so 2 is a common factor of both 6 and 8, and we proved it here using multiplication. All right, we did a whole practice sheet of this on Friday. Let me show you again what we did. Remember how we went through and listed all the factors for a certain number, and then listed, well, we didn't list all the factors, excuse me. We listed an example of a factor for 10, and then an example of a multiple for 10. So we were working with the factors that make up that number, and then multiples that that number could then skip count into, right? So we got some good practice on this on Friday. You should have completed it as homework as well. So that's exactly what we were doing there. We go back full screen. We were looking at the factors that make up a number, and then see how 2 is a common factor for each of 6 and 8. Okay, so now let's look at the multiples. How can we prove that both 6 and 8 share a common multiple of 24? So 6 and 8, what math problem can we show that 6 goes into 24 and 8 goes into 24? What do you think? Remember, multiples the product at the end, right? It's what it equals, right? So we need some math problem that has 24 at the end and 6 as a factor, and then multiply by some number that gets us to 24. I can even write that out for you. So we have 6 times something equals 24, because in this case 6, is a factor. And we're trying to show that 24 is a multiple of 6. So what do I need to put in the blank here to show that 6 is a factor of 24 and that 24 is a multiple of 6? Okay, I know Camila's got it. She's been on top of it today. I want to hear from somebody else. What can I put in this blank to show that 24 is a multiple of 6, that I can skip count by 6 and land on 24. Elizabeth?
Say 2 times 3. I mean 6 times. Yeah, 6 times 3.
6 times 3, that's close. If we were to skip count by 6, we would go 6, 12, 18. So that's times 3 is 18. So what do we need to multiply 6 by to get 24?
4?
Yeah, so if we were to count one more time, then there's our fourth one, and there's 24. So 6 times 4 gives us 24. So that proves that 24 is a multiple of 6, right? Because the multiple is at the end here. 6 is one of the factors in the factor pair, so therefore we can skip count by 6 and land on 24. Can someone do the exact same thing, but for 8 and 24? Right, because we're showing that numbers can share factors and multiples. We've already shown that 6 and 8 share a factor of 2 because we can make a factor pair with 2 that equals 6, with 2 that equals 8. And now we're showing that, well, we have common multiples now of 24 because we can skip count by 6 and land on 24, or multiply 6 with its factor pair of 4 to get us to 24. Okay, so now can we show it for 8? We've done 6 and 24. Can we show 8 and 24? And I see Camila and Elizabeth, but they've already answered. I want to hear from somebody else. I know that they know how to do it. What multiplication problem do I make to show that 8 skip counts into 24, or that 24 is a multiple of 8? What do you think?
I would say the 2.
Was that Tania that was talking?
It sounds like it, but I don't think so.
I'm not sure who's talking. If you have an answer, raise your hand, please. Eileen, what are you thinking? How can we show that 24 is a multiple of 8?
You can show that A is a multiple of 2 because
We're working for 24 as a multiple of 8 at the moment. We just showed over here that 8 is a multiple of 2. So can we show 24 as a multiple of 8?
Yes.
Okay, so what do we need to multiply 8 by to get 24? Oops, I just showed you. Pretend that didn't happen. Okay, so we have factors here. We have multiple here. How can I show that 24 is a multiple of 8? What do I need to multiply 8 by to get 24?
3.
Yeah, the one I just showed you, right?
Yeah.
On accident, out of habit. It's Monday morning for me too. So yes, 8 times 3 equals 24. So this shows with 24 being a multiple here, the product at the end, what is equal to? We know that the two factor pairs then that are multiplied together are factors of 24, and 24 is a multiple of those factors. All right, so 24 is a multiple of 8. And over here, we can show 24 is a multiple of 6, because 6 times 4 is 24. There's a factor pair involving 6. There's a factor pair involving 8 that equals 24. Okay, how do we feel about that? Does that make sense? Thumbs up, sideways down. Can you prove to me that something is a factor or multiple? Okay, I see some thumbs. I want to see some more thumbs. Thumbs up, sideways down. So far on this review. Okay. So I see a lot of thumbs up. That means that you're going to perform well on the quiz we have today, right? Because it's this kind of material, finding factor pairs. Okay, Sarah, we can talk at the end of class too. You came in late for all of this. This is only your first few days in. So we'll talk, Sarah, okay? So now going to the third section in the locker problem. So remember the locker problem that we did where the students were walking through the hall and touching the locker, depending on which number they started at and skip counted by that number. Remember that problem?
I remember.
Okay, so in the locker problem, we use what we learned about prime numbers, right? So prime numbers, that's important, to predict numbers that have very few or only 2 factors. Remember we said the more times, I'll go back to that. The more times we touched a locker means that we had more dots. And we said the more dots that they had, the more factors that they had, right? Because that meant that more numbers that we skip counted landed on 12, let's say, or 18 or 20. Those numbers that stood out with, like 6 or so dots, meaning they had 6 factors that make those numbers. And then we also said that these 2 dots numbers meant that the only factors that made that number in the end was 1 and that number, because 1 skip counted by 1 and touched every single locker, and then the only other student that touched that locker was the student that started at that locker. Right, so for 7 here, it was only first person, 7th person. For the 13th locker, it was only the first person and the 13th person, because we couldn't skip count by one of these lower numbers and land on 13 or 7 or any of these others that we noted. Okay, so when we look at this review, I'll read it again. In the locker problem, we use what we learned about prime numbers, and we said that those ones with only 2 were prime numbers. We use that to predict numbers that have very few or only 2 factors. And then lastly, in the final lesson, we explained the difference between factors and multiples by completing factor and multiple statements about the same number. So we use the same number. I'll go back to it again. This is what we did on Friday. We explained the difference between factors and multiples by looking at factors of a number and multiples of that number. So we had factors of 10. We had multiples of 10, and we showed the differences between each of those. We then had factors of 7, and then showed multiples of 7. Factors of 50, and multiples of 50. Remember, factors are the 2 numbers that we're multiplying together to get the answer, and the multiple is the product, and it's a multiple of each of those factors. Okay, so going back to the review over here. We said that we explained the difference between factors and multiples by completing those factor and multiple statements about the same number. Okay, Camila, do you have a question?
I thought it was a question, like difference between factors and multiples. I thought
Okay.
we explained it.
Do you want to explain it? I think it'd be good for you to explain it, maybe.
Sure. A factor is something that you could multiply it by. For example, 8 times 3, and the multiple is the answer.
Okay, and we would say that the answer is a multiple of the factors, right? Yeah, so we would say that 24 is a multiple of 8. It's a multiple of 3. 24 is a multiple of 4. 24 is a multiple of 6, right? Because this product here, it's still called a product, but we can say that it is a multiple of the two factors, right? Good explanation, Camila. Nice work. So are there any questions on this?
No. No.
No, you're feeling good? You ready to start the quiz? Well, Sarah, we'll talk. So let me show you the quiz. Actually, I'll just scroll right down. So this is what the quiz will look like. Let me scroll over a little bit. Okay, there are 3 questions. Okay, 3 questions on one page. This is not in your workbook. It would be in your packets if you have it, and it would be in your, well, on Teams too. Excuse me. So the first one here, pencils come in packages of 10 and 12. Jada's class needs 60 pencils. Which packages of pencils would you choose for Jada's class? Explain your reasoning. Okay, so we're working directly with multiples here, multiple factors and multiples. We want to see if either 10 or 20 or 12, excuse me, 10 or 12 are factors of 60. Okay, and if so, which package of pencils would you choose knowing you need 60? Okay, now looking at problem 2, find all the factor pairs for each number. Okay, A, you're finding all the factor pairs of 13. Okay, so make those factor rainbows. B is 16, so find the factor pairs of 16 using those factor rainbows, and then again with 24 as with the factor rainbows. Okay, and then lastly, number 3, select all of the statements that are true. So there could be more than one that is true. And it's working with prime numbers on the first 2, and then factors and multiples for the second 2. Okay, are there any questions on what you're supposed to do on this quiz?
No.
No, pretty straightforward.
No questions for me.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. I'm gonna stop recording.